In John chapter 4, Jesus encounters the Samaritan woman at the well. You guys are all very familiar with that story. He interacts with her, brings up her past in such a way that she accepts who he is as the Son of God. She leaves Jesus and goes back into the city where she came from before she came out to get her water. And she begins to tell everyone her story, that she just encountered this man who knew everything about her. And John tells us that many of the Samaritans believed that day because of her testimony. In Acts chapter 22 and 23, some Jews rile up some of the believers and cause a riot and have Paul arrested. So Paul's arrested, and before they carry him off to the barracks or wherever they were intended to carry him, he asks for permission to speak to the crowds. And he gets up and he starts talking and telling his story about how he used to be a Pharisee and how he used to prosecute people of the way, and then how God appeared to him on the Damascus road, and then how he became a Christian. He gave his testimony. Testimony is not really something that we have emphasized that much in our history. But it's such a wonderful and biblical way of revealing the power of God. What it allows us to do is to tell how God has impacted our lives. Each one of us is very unique as a child of God. We all have a different kind of story. And it's a story that normally does not get told, because historically we've kind of reserved all the talking for just a couple people, when God has affected multiple lives. And so sharing your testimony and sharing your story is a way for us to be transparent with one another and talk about the power of God and what he has done in our lives. So we're going to be doing more of this as we go forward. We're not going to be doing a long one like we're doing today. Will's just a big talker, so he asks for a lot of time. What we're going to try to emphasize and encourage more is just smaller testimonies, as in the two examples I just gave you are kind of redemption testimonies. They're like, how was I saved? How did God speak to me? How did God rescue me from my sin? There's another kind which is more of a deliverance testimony, which is, I'm struggled or have struggled, and I want to tell you how God came in and healed me, how God saved me from my struggles. We want to make opportunity for both of those, and they don't have to be long. We'll hopefully to incorporate those more into our normal assemblies, where if something God has done in your life in the last week, share for 2 or 3 minutes, share your testimony, and encourage us as a family to hear each other's stories and what God is doing in our lives. So Will gets the first shot at it. We primarily chose Will because you guys have known him evidently since he was very small, and you know his story, but there's a part in there that Will wanted to talk about that you don't know that much about, and he thought it would be encouraging for you to hear that. So I'll turn the floor over to Will.
Thank you, Dave. Good enough? All right. I appreciate the introduction, and like he said, I did want to make this a little bit lengthier, mainly because there is a bit of a gap from when I was coming here to, and then I kind of dropped out and stopped coming, and then I came back earlier this year. So yeah, as he mentioned, I started coming here when I was very young, about 4 years old. My parents moved from Texas and started coming here. My dad got a preaching job here, and as Dane Tate so graciously reminded me, we came into the front row and I was lying down sick as a dog first day I came here. I've since gotten better, thankfully. And yeah, pretty much ever since then, for about 14 years, I had been coming to church regularly. Dad being the preacher, obviously we were involved with a lot of things. Mom and dad doing lots of teaching and stuff, and me and my sisters being involved with the classes that a lot of you had taught, being involved with VBS, Vacation Bible School, with a lot of the kids being involved in those things. I remember doing all the events and going to all the things, and later on doing LTC, Leadership Training for Christ, with a lot of the other kids as well, doing all these things, growing and learning about the Bible, about Christ. and just learning all these things and being involved with all you guys. And then when I was about 18 or 19, I realized something. I realized that I was doing all those things because I was encouraged to. I wasn't necessarily doing it because I wanted to. And I realized, wait a minute, what do I think? What do I actually think about this? Is this actually real? It wasn't necessarily, well, I guess it was a little bit of doubt, more so in the sense of just I wasn't sure. I was kind of hesitant. I had been exposed to all this knowledge, all this truth, all this wisdom, but I was just perhaps being a bit skeptical, me, my personality. Oh, I want the details. I want the measurements, whatever. Maybe I just didn't have enough faith to believe. Maybe it was just, I was just so skeptical. I was like, I don't know if this is actually real. I was growing up and self-actualizing and like, but let me see what I think. So then I sort of stopped coming as much. I kind of drifted off, not attending church as often, and kind of exposing myself to other philosophies, other things, not necessarily other religions, but just other ways of thinking, other ideas and stuff. So that's the biggest reason of why I kind of stopped coming. I just had a little bit of reluctance. I felt a little bit more agnostic of more, I don't know what's out there. I didn't have enough faith or belief. I didn't see it for myself. I was just like, oh, I don't know anything. I'm just a tiny little person. I hardly know anything. How can I believe that there's this God? Obviously, I figured, well, something made us, that's obvious. We didn't just pop out of the universe, whatever. Something happened, but I just had doubt that it was the God of the Bible. And it was just kind of weird, but it's something I had to do myself, just part of my growing. Just like, wait a second, what do I believe? What do I feel? And then, let's see, a few years after that, just studying and learning and thinking about other things, other philosophies, whatever, I came into the idea of learning and understanding human relations and how to deal with people, and started reading books on that subject matter, namely one of them, Dale Carnegie's classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People, among others. And as I was reading these books, I realized that pretty much the Bible already talked about all that stuff, about how to talk to people, how to deal with people, how to relate to others. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Okay, all right, whatever. But then later on, it did just kind of hit me that the Bible is right. It was just kind of I don't know, just a weird epiphany moment, and just kind of like, that is how it is. It's probably just God being like, hey, I'm right here, just something like that. Because I've always been more introverted and less outgoing, and I think that's kind of how God speaks to me, just in more small little ways, slowly guiding me little bit by little bit. I have some friends that I know that God's like, oh, yep, go right over here, go do this, go do that, and that's great. That's how God talks to them, but I don't think that's how he talks to me, and that's fine, because we're all different. We're all different children of his. And then April 24th, that's the morning I got called to be baptized. So earlier in this year, I did start coming back to church, because I realized, well, church is the right thing. Like, it's right. It just kind of hit me. So then after a few months in April, I was having some dream that morning, and then a finger touched my forehead and took me out of the dream that I was having. And I was just laying in my bed on my back, and my pillow turned into legs, the legs of someone kneeling with my head in their lap. And then these hands took my head from underneath them and went to pull the back of my head. Like in physical therapy, they do spinal alignments and whatever, and pull your neck back so that you breathe properly or crack the spine, whatever it is they do. These hands went to go do that to my head, and I stiffened up. I refused for a moment, and then I relaxed, and the hands pulled my head back, held them there, lifted my head and turned it to one side, lifted my head, turned it to the other side, lifted my head, put it to center, kissed my forehead, and said, "Get baptized today." And then I woke up. It was the most incredible, surreal experience. I was both in my bed and seeing myself in my bed at the same time. It was so bizarre for me. And when I woke up, I had this incredible feeling. It was a feeling of both joy and excitement and giddiness, like a little kid has when they get some crazy present, but it was also just a soothing calm, just a peace about it too. It was so incredible. And I had the idea of getting baptized in a different way. Usually my parents will come up and visit from Texas, and I had the idea of having my father baptize me in the lake when they would come up later in the year. So I was a little off-put of getting baptized that day. But I was like, okay, I read my Bible a little bit. I did some praying. I said, okay, Lord, if you want me to get baptized today, I need some other sort of sign, some other calling, someone saying, hey, get baptized. And then I went about my day. That day, we were going to hang out with some friends of mine. We worked at Meijer previously, still keep in touch. So we went out to Standale, got a bite to eat at Freddy's. Very tasty, I highly recommend. And we were just hanging out, just doing whatever. And there was a Meijer nearby. We were like, oh, let's go to the Meijer. We had all worked at Meijer. We were like, oh, let's go hang out at Meijer. Okay, whatever. So we all go in, and it was funny because the Meijer over there looked almost exactly the same as the Meijer on West Shore. It was the same exact layout. We were like, oh man, it's the same. Oh, look, they got this over here, this over here. So we were just running around having a grand old time. All my buddies were in one aisle for a moment, and I walked to another aisle looking at Nerf guns or something, whatever. And I hear someone walk up to them, and he says, hey guys, this is kind of weird, but I feel like God has called me to come talk to you guys, you know? And he starts evangelizing to them, some random guy. And I hear it, and I'm like, it's for me, Lord, isn't it? So then I walk over, we start talking. His name was Donovan. He just started evangelizing to them. And I was like, oh, hey, what's up? And he was like, I just feel called to come talk to you guys about Jesus and how he loves you, how he wants a relationship with you. And all these things he was saying, he was trying to say it to my friends, but really he was saying it to me. And so I prayed a little bit. I was like, okay, God, that's my cue. All right. So we talked a little bit more, exchanged numbers, parted ways. And then I called my buddy up. I'm like, hey, man, you want to baptize me? He's like, what? What is this coming from? I was like, it's the whole thing. I'll tell you later. He was like, okay, we'll do it. I was like, okay, cool. So I finished hanging out with my friends, go back to Holland. We were having a dinner with some friends of us, and I was like, guys, I need to get baptized today. And they're like, what? I told them the little story. They're like, where are we going to do it? Because it was at like 9:30 in the evening. And I was like, well, we could go to the lake. I'd rather not because I don't know when they close. But I was like, it's fine. I got keys to my church. We'll just break in and I'll get baptized. They're like, okay. And I was like, okay, cool. So we all scurry over here. I have some of the old keys, so it only opened like one of the doors. So I tried to figure out which of the doors I opened. Finally got in, let everybody else in. Go over to the baptistry. The door's locked. I'm like, Great, the door is locked. How do we do that? So then I was looking around and trying to figure out, so we got a stool. I climbed up over the thing. Highly don't recommend, don't try this at home or at church. I climbed over the thing and ninja parkoured over, opened the door, went inside, got all the stuff, opened the door. And yeah, then my friend baptized me that evening with a small little group of our close-knit friends, and it was a good night. Praise God. Later I think that following week, I actually told Justin the story, just real quick. And he was like, "Oh, you mean there was water in the baptistry?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, it's a baptistry. Of course it's got water in it." I was like, "It was warm and bubbly and perfect." I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Well, we've been having a lot of issues with it recently." And I was like, "No way." I was like, "It was totally fine." He was like, "It would be a miracle if we go over there and there's no water in it." And I was like, "Okay." So we walk over and it's only half full instead of being empty. So it was only half a miracle, I guess. So, but yeah, so that's basically the summation of it. I had never had a moment like that moment that morning of that April day, and it was just absolutely mind-blowing to me. And I haven't experienced a moment like that, but I don't know that I'll need to, because again, the way that I think my personality is, the way that I am, the way that God speaks to me and moves me is a little bit more gentle and flowing rather than, "Hey, I need you to do this, hey, I need you to do that." So I do feel on the right path with what has transpired since then and all the things that I'm doing. And I'm very grateful to all of you. And in closing, I do want to mention one last thing. When I was in German class, there was a quote from a famous German writer, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The quote was, "There are two things that parents should give their children, roots and wings." You guys are my roots as well. I've lived here for many years, as I said earlier, started coming a long time ago, and you guys are my roots. You awesome people, you awesome, incredible, godly, kind people, very caring and very loving. And I don't know completely all of your guys' roots. I know some of your guys' pasts a little bit. But I know that we still have wings and that we can still soar together for whatever God's plan is for us. So I encourage you, God definitely has a lot more planned for all of us here in this congregation. So you may be old, you may be tired, you may be weary, you may be young, but let's get up, let's stretch our wings, dust them off, and rise together for whatever God has in store for us. Thanks for letting me share today. Grace and peace be with you all. In Christ's name, amen.